Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Series 9 webinar for BDP. We'll get kicked off here in a few minutes, just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin here. As you know, this is our ninth series, so we've got quite a bit in the pipeline in development already. Series 4 sets have shipped, and series and for our APAC markets, those will be arriving soon. And then we have Series 5 that has already pre-ordered and will be shipping in late October, early November. So we've got a lot in development here, but as we keep moving forward, we have Series 9 and a whole new manufacturing year. So we're moving to manufacturing year 2027. So that means we've had a big palette change over the summer. So hopefully you've seen the palette in development. We'll talk through a little bit more of that later and what's to expect with that. But yeah, so there's a lot to come and a lot of excitement as we get into a whole new manufacturing year and all the excitement that brings. So without further ado, let's kick it off, and we can start walking through the timeline for this series. And then we can get into a couple of the other rules and submission updates and that kind of thing. So submission intake, much like past series, is going to happen in middle to late September. So again, any series, so this is series 9, 12, 15, etc. Those will always be middle of September to the end of September. Along with the other series, we usually have submission intake in January. And then with Series 8, we moved things around a little bit to have some fun with BrickWorld Chicago and the live stream that we had there. Typically, that's a May timeframe for submission intake, but we moved that up a little bit. So again, those are kind of the cadence that we stay on, and so we should be around September, January, and April, May timeframe for submission intakes. We then take a week to review the models that have been submitted. As a reminder, we just need to make sure that you have your models submitted before the close of open submissions on the 26th at noon Pacific. It just needs to be submitted. It doesn't need to be approved. If you're working last minute on your model, just get it submitted. Doesn't matter if it's not finished. We have a little bit of time to get that approved and finished up before crowd support begins and when voting begins on October 6th. That goes for it's a little under 2 weeks. And then once we have all of those votes in, that's when we go into the review process. So as you know, we will go through and take a look at several different things. Most importantly is the amount of votes that you receive. That's the driving factor. And then we'll look and see, okay, how would the variety of price point and theme, part count, etc. to review those. We'll test build a few of the models, and then we'll narrow that down to the 5 finalists for that series. Those will be announced November 19th. That will be a live stream like we've done for Series 6 and Series 7. And so again, we'll have that unveiled on the 19th. After the 19th, if your model was not selected as a finalist, that opens up the review process where you can go through and request feedback on your model, and the BDP team can provide feedback on ways to maybe improve your model or things to consider when you're designing your model and potentially resubmitting it to the next series. We will work through those models, through those 5 finalist models. We work with fan designers for roughly 5 months or so as we take those through the Lego design process and make stability changes, make sure all the elements are active and still available, and do a little bit of creative changes with the fan designers. So we go through that process, and then it's into manufacturing, where we're manufacturing elements and getting ready to assemble sets based off of how many are ordered during crowdfunding period, which will happen in October 2026. So about over a year from now is when we will crowdfund these sets, and then they will ship March 2027. So it's about a year and 5 months from start to finish. It's a year and 8 months-ish if you consider when the palette is released. We're going to try to make sure that palettes are released about 3 months ahead of time, so you have enough time to go through and start working and planning on your models, especially over the summer, since we do have the big palette change. Most of the other palettes throughout the year will be building on this palette, and then over the summer is when you have the big palette reset. So we'll go on to the next slide. All right, so this is just our general reminder. The forum is the best place to get a hold of the BDP staff. So we are typically there. We try to be there every day, making sure we're answering any questions. There's a lot of different ways to request feedback on your models, to request, hey, this part's missing. Is all of the parts are missing for that specific element, or I should say all the colors. All the colors for a specific part are missing. Is that on purpose or is that an accident? It's not to request specific individual parts, like I want this part in reddish brown because it used to be produced. Well, that's not what we're trying to do there. It's if you find an error with the palette, because there are tens of thousands of parts in the palette, we want to make sure that we're getting everything through so that you have all the parts that you could potentially have. So if there's that, or questions on theming, or if you have an issue with something in Studio and the way that you need to submit up into BDP, any kind of thing, any kind of BDP related questions, feedback, things for the team to consider, etc. That's all posted there, and we love when we have engagement with the community. It's a great way that we get a lot of our feedback and communicate with the fan community. And then also there's the BDP support email address, bdpsupport@lego.com. That's also another way for maybe something that's a little bit more sensitive or something that you don't want to just share publicly. You can email us there. Just note that that is specifically for BDP design process and submission style issues. It's not for order issues or anything like that with your BDP order. That all has to go through lego.com customer service, because that's where your order is placed. So go to the next one. All right, so getting into to kind of some of the historical data from this past series, just to kind of give you an idea of where models netted out from Series 8. So Series 8, we had, I believe this number is actually slightly wrong. It's 384 submissions is what we had. I think because of the way this is measured, the 5 finalists get pulled out. We had so 384, 379. We're in a good place with the submissions. We love seeing submissions right around this mark, because it does. The more and more we get, obviously, that would be great. But I think that's a lot of fatigue on the fan community. But then also from a voting standpoint, that it kind of becomes a little tedious over time too. So we love where we're at right now with the submission standpoint. That's really good, and it's healthy with a 270. Basically 270 designers participating in that too. So we love seeing that. We love seeing the new fan designers coming in, but we also want to make sure that we are fostering the existing fan designers that are participating. So we have a couple different things that we're doing in the interim, or that we've added along the way, like providing feedback to fan designers that are participating, so we can help you level up your skills as we're participating in this program. So you'll see we're starting to see a little bit of decline in medieval castles. So for some of you fans, you might start rejoicing in that and seeing that we get a lot of medieval castle submissions. They are quite popular, but by participating or submitting a castle set, obviously then that becomes a lot of competition. And then space, sci-fi, fantasy. There's been some feedback on with this category being kind of a combination of multiple themes. Just know that just because there was a space set selected as a finalist, that doesn't prevent a fantasy set from being selected as a finalist for that series. It's more of just make it easier, so there's less buckets per se, that when you're going through and trying to sort out and filter during the voting process, it just makes it easier on that side. It doesn't mean that a space set would also block a fantasy set. I think you see this with Series 5. We did Adventure in Transylvania, which is technically a fantasy set since it's kind of Dracula based. And then there was also Mushroom Village, which is in the fantasy base as well. So just because they're two kind of fantasy sets, fantasy is so wide and large of a theme, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But overall, there are some things to take note from this, is that some of the smaller themes are areas where there might be some opportunity. So obviously Pirate, you can see Pirate's quite small from a submission standpoint, even though it is always highly voted. So there's some opportunity there. Vehicle, boat, airplane. There hasn't been any airplanes, I think, that I can think of that have been submitted. I think there might be a handful here or there. There might be smaller builds that are part of a larger set. I can think of, like there was a vintage airport, and I think of some like adventurer style theme sets that had some really nice airplanes in them. But maybe that's something to consider. Obviously, we saw with the Brick Railroad locomotive, this last series, where you had just a specific rail car or the locomotive. That's something that for those smaller models, for in the 400 to 1400-ish part range, that's something that could potentially do very well in that area. So maybe there's some opportunity there. And also in that range is space. So space is something that has been relatively underrepresented, although there are a lot of fans for it. So that's another area where you could probably see some more models submitted. And then just the breakdown of the amount of parts that are in each set. So we do see a lot of sets being in that 3,000 to 4,000 part range. And note that when you're designing a 4,000 part set, just make sure, I know it's easy to put a lot of elements into a set, because especially when you're building mocks, you don't have to worry about how many elements are in a set. And this is also pretty wide open in the sense that the only cap is 4,000 parts. But you should think about the theme of your model and what your subject of your model is, and if 4,000 parts is necessary or is something that you would be comfortable spending, potentially, let's just say ballpark 10 cents per part, if you would be comfortable spending $400 on. So this is the number one feedback that we give to a lot of fan designers, is that if you put 10 cents per part on that design, and you wouldn't be comfortable paying that much for it, then you probably need to rethink your design a little bit and find some ways to trim some elements, combine elements in certain areas where you can have a lot of 1x1 part detail that could be, put into 1x4s or larger elements. And so you can get a little bit more creative with that. You'll see there are a few sets that kind of are a lot larger. If you look at some of the past BDP sets, so like Old Train Engine Shed from Series 1 was a great example of a set that is much larger than you would expect it to be for being in the 2,000 element range. That had a lot of 1x16s, a lot of larger window panel pieces, and it was 2 full base plates. It's a large set for being 2,000 parts. So there are some 4,000 part sets that it's about the same size as. Same with Art Factory in Series 6. For the size of the model that it is, it's really efficient with the parts that are being used, and so therefore the scale seems a lot larger, and can draw more votes just because it looks like a much more substantial model for a lot less part count. So just some things to think about. We're not saying don't design 4,000 part sets. Obviously they're very popular with the fan community. I'm just saying that you need to think about where does your set fall. Because as we are going through and selecting our finalists, we have to make sure that we are averaging right around 2,500 parts across all 5 models. And so sometimes you might have 2 4,000 part models and 2 smaller models, and sometimes it might be a more evenly distributed variety of sets, where you have 1 small set, 3 medium sets and 1 large set. Or you could have like Series 4 where we had 5 medium-sized sets. So it could totally depend from series to series, but the closer you are to the 2,500 part number, the more likely it is to be selected, just statistically, because you're not moving that needle up or down from an average standpoint. And then other times you might get lucky because there's a specific part count that we need for the 5th spot, and that's the next model up. So don't be discouraged if your model isn't selected, because sometimes it all comes down to what fits in the part count, and other times it might be, you put yourself in a harder situation than it could have been if you were maybe a couple hundred parts lower. So we can go on to the next one. All right, so just some real quick to get through this, to get through some general basics, and then we'll get into some small updates that we have. This series should be pretty similar to past series. There's not really any submission guideline updates for this series. This should be basically exactly the same as Series 8. So we'll go through these pretty quickly here. So again, although we are 18 plus adult themed sets, we still need to follow Lego group guidelines. So that pertains to some of the sustainability goals that the Lego group has. So we can't do things like mining and deforestation. We want to stay away from modern military and overt religious, theming in some of our models. So again, you can do church-style buildings, but don't put crosses on the outside. Same for other types of things. It should just be pretty generic in a sense. Models can't contain third-party IP or current Lego group IP, and that would be things like the Lego group IP would be like Ninjago, Friends, Monkey Kid, Icons, modulars. Those are things that have yearly releases. The things that don't have yearly releases, so things like Castle and Pirate and Classic Space and that kind of thing, those are not yearly releases. So those are things that we're allowed to play in those themes. Avoid brick-built Lego trademarks. So there's 3 of those. That's the minifigure, the 2x4 brick, and the Lego logo. So we can't do Lego. You can use the Lego logo in your models. You just can't do brick-built mosaics of the Lego logo. We can't do brick-built upscaled minifigures, and we can't do brick-built upscaled 2x4 bricks. So those are trademarks that we own. So if we're paying for the design of it, then that doesn't make sense that we own it. Avoid, and then the last one is we get a lot of questions around this, and so this isn't as I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in what we mean by when we say avoid faction names and titles. So similar to the brick-built trademarks, we want to avoid putting things like Black Falcon or Lion Knight or Imperial or some of these things that are some of the factions that exist within the Lego universe. We try to avoid putting those into the name because at the end of the day, we are purchasing the rights to the model and the title of the model. So if there are words that are in the title that are already being used by the Lego group, then we want to avoid having those in those models. So you'll see, so far I guess this is probably more specific to Castle, where it pops up more frequently. I guess it could potentially pop up in Classic Space with things like Blacktron and Mtron and some of the other things. But we would say, okay, Mountain Fortress from Series 1, we specifically did not put Black Falcon in the title of that, or Forceman's Hideout in Series, we didn't call it Forceman's Hideout in Series 2, 3. It was for Stronghold. Same with Outlaw Forest Den. It's not it's a Wolfpack set, but we didn't put Wolfpack in the title. So hopefully that makes sense. We're not gonna reject your set if you put it in there. We're just gonna ask you to change the title. So pretty straightforward, very easy to do. All right. Again, designers can only be selected as a finalist once per calendar year. So if you were a finalist for Series 7 or if you were a finalist for Series 8, you're not eligible for Series 9, but you will be eligible for Series 10 onwards. If you are selected as a finalist for this series, for Series 9, well, it's the last series for 2025, so therefore you're immediately eligible for the first series in 2026. So again, we're doing it by calendar year, so it's easier to monitor and to track. But it just means that we're trying to help diversify the finalists from bunching up too much, or having the same finalists chosen over and over again. And then I touched on this earlier. Crowd validation votes are what matters most. So what that means is we're going to take the votes, the sets with the highest amount of love and like votes, and then work our way down from a theming perspective. That doesn't mean we take the top 5 sets. It's the highest voted set for each of their theme, and then we'll then filter down for part count, because if the third set that we need to place is a city set or a modern building, something like that, and it's the highest voted one is a 4,000 part set. If we already have a 4,000 part set selected and we don't have room for that, then we're going to have to skip that and go to the next set that is in the 3,000 part range or 2,500 part range, or whatever would come next, and then slot that in. So again, that's where we say the part count matters, but votes matter the most. And then, again, the diversity of themes. So we want to make sure that we're selecting each of something that is, it's not all the same type of thing throughout the entire series. And then we'll slowly filter out how's this going to place out. So it might end up being that it's the number 1 set, the number 6 set, the number 24 set, and number 28 set, or something like that. So, or it could be all 5 sets could be in the top 20. They could be in the top 10 to about 15. It just depends. But we know that historically, we might say, oh, I can't believe it's all the way down to 28, number 28 in voting is being selected as a finalist. Well, it's if 30 out of the 50 are castle sets, well, 30 out of the top 50 are then eliminated once we take the first castle set. So it doesn't matter. Don't worry. Oh, I'm not getting as many votes as a castle set or something else. That doesn't matter. So that's how you start seeing models that are you would assume are not as high. And then also don't worry about comments. Comments are something that we do not factor in at all. There's a high variance in the amount of comments that happen from set to set. That's a way for the fan community to interact with each other, to provide feedback to the fan designers, and to communicate. So that is not something that we take into consideration at all. Okay. Then go next. All right, so one thing that we get a lot of questions on is, I want to submit my model, I have something designed, how can I check what's available, what's not available? So if you go under the step list on the right-hand side, as long as you have the current series selected, there is a filter icon, and you can toggle on and unavailable within the selected palette. That allows you to see which elements, any elements that then show up in the step list, are not in the palette. What gets confusing is that this is not under the color validation tab. The color validation tab is to check which parts have ever been produced in this color. So sometimes you might see a yellow exclamation point next to a part. That is because that part has never been actually manufactured in that color by the Lego group. So there is 2 differences between that. Obviously if you see that, then that's a part that just doesn't exist at all. And then if you turn this filter on, it's telling you this part is not currently in the active palette for this series. So there's that. And then one other thing that we do get a lot of questions on is, where are all the decorated elements? If you look on the left-hand side in the element window, there is a brick with some dashed lines through it. And that is the decoration on and off toggle. So just above all of the elements in the part palette on the left toolbar, you'll see that if it is turned off and it is just a hollow outline of I think it's a 2x2 brick, or a 1x2 brick, because I guess it's technically 2-dimensional. That's how you turn decorated elements on and off. So if you're looking and you're like, wait, where are all the printed torsos? Where are all the printed bricks? That's what's happened, is your toggle for decorated elements is turned off. So you turn that on and you'll see everything again. And then also, models can be resubmitted more than 2 times. So, as you're working on your models, historically it was those couldn't be resubmitted more than twice. But now it is, as long as you are making updates to your model, you're taking the feedback that the fan community is providing to you. If you're asking the BDP team for advice, if you're putting that into use, as long as you're showing us you're working on the model, then we'll allow it to keep being submitted. There's a handful of models that have been selected as finalists after they've been submitted, multiple times. I think the Privateer Frigate Fortuna was submitted 5 times. Sushi Restaurant was submitted 3 times. So just because you haven't been selected the first time or the second time doesn't mean, oh, I'm never going to be selected. There's a handful of models that have been selected after being submitted multiple times, because they get better and better, and as they're being refined, they build a fan base and can grow. So do that, and then next one. So again, we get a lot of questions on the amount of stickers, the amount of minifigures. So we reduced. So this is artificially limited, just so that we don't get a ton of stickers in a model, artificially inflating the vote count, because it's a 400 part model and it has 25 stickers on it. or it's a 400 part model and it's got 25 minifigures in it. It's just a giant glorified battle pack. That's not, we're trying to make it so that the model is the differentiator for the build. That's what draws people in. And then later on, if it's selected as a finalist, then we can go in and look at the amount of stickers, the amount of minifigures, etc. So again, that limit's in place just to make sure that minifigures are not overwhelmingly driving the set for why it is successful. Try to keep personal identifiable information out of your stickers. We can include one piece, but we can't do multiple. So for example, if you put your initials and then your birth year on a license plate or something like that, that's not allowed. We can only do initials or birth year or something like that. And then also with that, with stickers, we prefer to use iconography instead of English, or any language really. It's this is a global program, and so if you can use iconography, that is something we would try to do instead of covering a model with English all over. Obviously, there are certain things that would require there to be English on the sticker, but if it is possible, we try to do without that. And then also, if you're designing stickers, know that they don't have to be perfect. They're just placeholders to represent the idea of what you're trying to do. All stickers and instructions are completely redesigned by Lego graphic designers. So, don't put a ton of time and effort into you don't have to put a ton of time into your stickers. You don't have to put a ton of time into your instructions, especially your instructions in the way that the pages are laid out. As long as the step editor is good and we can follow that along, that's all we're asking for. We don't need the page to be laid out and every view to be perfect. We're going through the step editor and just tabbing through each step just to see that it's buildable as is, and there's no major stability issues that we see. So just keep that in mind. We don't have to put a ton of time or effort in either one of those. And if you don't have great Photoshop skills or Adobe InDesign or Illustrator skills, don't worry about it. Sticker and MS Paint was more than enough to signify what you're trying to get across with some stickers, and those are fine because they'll be redesigned. Go to the next one. So for this one, as I mentioned earlier, this is the palette. So this palette has been released July 1st, but over the summer, there's large amounts of parts that are being launched as July, August, and September are big launch waves. So right now you will see parts that were just available for July 1st. August 1st, there will be a whole lot of parts that come available. And also some of the things that we maybe missed in the July wave, where if there's all of one part specifically missing, we'll add those in at that time as well. I think there might be a set or two launching in the middle of August. So once those sets launch, then those parts will then go live as well. So those will be added in. If you go to the forum, Sylvan does a wonderful job of highlighting which elements have been added, what have been removed, etc. So it's a lot easier to go through and see what's available. And then any missing elements that you see, just report it in the forum. There's a request to add element list. Like I mentioned, this isn't, hey, this used to be available in the past, 10 years ago, and I want this available in reddish brown. It's if all of an element type is missing and it looks like it's missing because of an error, then let us know. Otherwise, it's not for, this specific color of this specific part is missing, but all the other colors are available. Usually they're not there. If it's not there, it's not there for a reason. So go to the next slide. There's multiple different ways to request feedback on your model. So this is something I want to touch on. Please, if you would like to, if you're thinking about resubmitting your model, or even if you don't want to resubmit that specific model, you can ask us for feedback. So there is a section called Discussion with User that is on your My Submissions page. So as long as you have initiated some type of chat with us in the past during the submission intake area or phase, you can then use that chat is live. So the big caveat there is that you have to initiate the conversation with us during that phase. Otherwise, it will be locked. We can't just spam messaging out to you and say, would you like feedback? You have to send it to us, and then we can then initiate conversation with you. Otherwise, if that's not available, if there wasn't any chat back and forth during the submission phase, then you can email us at bdpsupport@lego.com and say you would like feedback on your model. Just let us know what the name of the model is, and then we can provide that feedback to you within the My Submissions page. And then also the forum. You can come to the forum, and usually there's a thread asking for feedback, and we can do it there. It's usually easiest if you do it within the chat box in the My Submissions page, but the other ones are acceptable as well. And then we go to the next slide. So something new that we want to try out. So we are going to try something like a summer school / BDP office hours. So this is something we are going to do on August 26th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific. We're going to ask people to sign up for a time slot ahead of time. So what we're thinking is maybe we'll do 15-minute slots where you can kind of come prepared with questions that you have on your model. If there's something that you're working through and you're having challenges with, maybe it's something within, hopefully it's all model related and not studio related issues. I mean, we can try to help troubleshoot some of that live, or show you workarounds for something like maybe it's a flexible element that's not behaving properly, and we can give you some kind of ideas on how to navigate around that. But otherwise, it's hey, I'm trying to do this with my model and I'm not, and something's not working, or I'm kind of stuck here and this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And then we can probably give you some different ideas or some tips for maybe how you could navigate that. So we recommend not bringing your entire model. So what we'll ask is that you send us your model ahead of time, or maybe it's a specific section of your model, because this will be public. So it's a way for people to maybe kind of learn from some other people, and see what are the other kind of questions that people are asking. But then also to kind of get some inspiration. So because of that, just know that some of these things will be shared publicly. So if it's something that you're working on for your next BDP submission, maybe only take a subsection of what you're working on, and all of the other detail that's not necessary, we can remove that from the model. So it's not shared ahead of time if it's something you're worried about being out. If you're not concerned about it at all, then we can work on the main model, but that's just something to consider. So it's something we wanted just to try this time around and see how it goes. But if you're interested in this, let us know. We'll put a sign up sheet or a link to that I think it'll be most likely in the forums. There'll be more information about this in the forums, so stay tuned there. And in the coming week or so, we should have some more feedback on how to sign up for that. So we're hoping to do kind of a first come, first serve sign up. So that way, depending on how many people we have signed up, we can figure out how much time we need, and if we need more time, we can potentially schedule another date to do this as well. So hopefully it's something to again help the fan community and you, the fan designers, progress. So we'll do that, and then start. So we're getting ready to kick off submission intake. That's September 15th. We're excited, as we'll have many different sets launching over the summer, so it'll add a lot more parts to the palette. And so just keep an eye on that. Note that not every set that launches over the summer, all those parts may or may not be available, but a good majority of them will be. So you can kind of look ahead to some of the models images that have been released on lego.com. Maybe they're up for pre-order or something like that, so you'll see some of the elements that might be coming down the pipeline, and you can start thinking about how you might incorporate them. And then also, our manufacturing year isn't totally locked yet, so there's a big asterisk on this, maybe some parts from Series 8 palettes that could potentially now make their way back into the Series 9 palette, but that will be relatively late. You probably would be like the September 1st launch, where we might get some more information on manufacturing for the following year, and so some elements might also make their way into there. You'll see if you go back and look at the palette from last summer, you can kind of track along and see how that progressed, and so that can be used kind of as a benchmark for what you might experience this summer. So. And with that, we can go on to Q&A. All right. You can get feedback on your model by the BrickLink staff before submitting. So Yes, you can. There's a little bit of, there's a couple different ways that this is possible. Um, you can either send us questions at bdpsupport@lego.com and we can provide some feedback. We get model feedback questions every once in a while. This feedback has to be a little bit more generic rather than like I would reduce your part count and I would do this and remove that, and we're a little bit we try to be a little bit more direct with the feedback after we've received the voting, because unless we otherwise we're telling you what we think, not what we're telling you based off of the voting that you've received, in a sense. So when we see what your voting totals are, then that gives us a much better idea of maybe where there is areas for improvement. We don't want to give you too much feedback ahead of time, because who's to say that we're the experts on knowing what the fan community is going to think is the best. So yes, so you can ask us for some feedback on your models ahead of time, although it's much more limited. But then also, like with the office hours coming up, it's another way to get some feedback ahead of the voting process. How religious is too religious? There were some cathedrals last round. So again, cathedrals are fine. Same with, I'm sure you could get away with a mosque or a temple or anything else like that. It's the iconography that goes along with it. So if you have a cathedral and there's a giant stained glass window cross in the middle of it, like that's where we're going to say, all right, that's too much. Right. You can have a building that looks like a cathedral, that could be a place of worship, but all of the iconography that goes along with that specific type of worship is where we're going to say we want to kind of avoid that. So that's the difference between it being a landmark or a religious building, if that makes sense. What part range sets have the fewest entries? I think if I got to look back at what it was, it's typically right now this is broken up into kind of 1,000 part ranges. I think the lowest that I can think of is usually that 900 to like 1,400-ish part range. That's probably the area that would be the highest chance of, or could be more successful, or there's room for more success, because what that it does is if you have one of those models that's in that range that's highly voted, there's not typically a lot of competition in that range. But then also what ends up happening is that opens up the ability to have multiple larger models, so multiple 3,500 plus sets, which is also something that's if we have something that's in the 1,400s range, well then that allows the amount of votes to kind of creep up, in a sense, where we can take some more models from the top 10 per se, because that's typically where you're going to see some of those 4,000 part sets, or 3,500 plus, I should say. It's rare that you see 2,500-ish part models really creep into the top there, just because the detail is it's a different level of detail. So understandably, the higher voted sets are going to be the more detailed models, the larger models. So yeah, I would say right in that 900 to 1,400-ish part range is probably an underrepresented area. Was there any talk on maybe providing feedback on which quartile your build was placed in, such as top 25%, bottom 25%? So there's been a little bit of discussion around this, because we're trying to find out is where do we is that your positioning in a voting standpoint, is it due to the voting because people didn't like your model, or is it because people didn't the model wasn't positioned properly, if that makes sense? So like, let's say you had the renders could have been better. Maybe it was an issue with the renders and it wasn't an issue with the model. So if you see that you're in the bottom 25%, we tell you, oh, you're in the bottom 25%, like you might be much more likely to say, well, I need to abandon this idea because clearly it wasn't popular. When in reality it was, well, if you fix your renders, then now you're going to be in this, might be in the 60% range. And then with some other little things, then we can get it up to the 80% range. So I think it's a little bit harder to say, are you in the top 25% or if you're in the bottom 25%. We usually are pretty transparent if you're asking about, is this worth revisiting, and we'll say, yeah, it's worth revisiting, or no, you might want to reconsider, or you need to change maybe the size, the scope of the model is just too big. It's a collection of models that are 4,000 parts when you might want to break one item off, and that might be more successful. So just sharing a blanket of here's where the voting ended up, I think it might do more harm than good. We need to provide context around what that is, or why we think the voting ended up where it was. So hopefully that would be more beneficial to fans, for fan designers. For the office hours, would it be like a live stream, or could you join in with a video call in general? We think we're going to do kind of more of a kind of what we're doing right now, in a sense where we'll ask people to join, and we'll kind of do it live on air, going through here's all of the here's the question, and then we're going to kind of talk through that, and then if it needs to be through chat or voice or however we find the best way to do it, because I also have to recognize that not everyone speaks English as their first language. Not everyone's comfortable being on camera and all the other things. We're going to try to think through some of the ideas on how we're going to fully accomplish that. But the idea is that it would be streamed out, and then that way maybe people can ask questions while we're going through and talking through it as well. So we're just trying to test some new things to see how are the other ways that we could provide value to the fan designers. You're putting a lot of time and effort into these models, and so we want to try to again provide more ways to help you through that process. When would you expect an update to the palette? August 1st? Yeah, so Friday's August 1st, so that's when you would see the next update to the palette. And then again, September 1st, you'll see it. Now, just depending on where you are in the globe, if you're in Australia, you're going to have to wait a little longer. Obviously, you're living in the future compared to us here in California. But I would assume by noon California time, you should be seeing on the 1st, you should be seeing new elements appear. How can you sign up for the office hours? So right now we'll say we'll probably start a thread in the studio forum, or for the BDP forum and studio and under the studio forum, and that will be a way to sign up for it, and then we'll communicate out exactly how everyone signed up. Are we allowed to use official Lego artwork as stickers? For example, using the new faction emblems and stickers and shields better. Yeah, you can do that. That's not a problem. You're allowed, and again, you're allowed to use the Lego logo, as long as you're using it in a respectful way. That's all totally fine. There's really no restrictions of use with those, with any kind of things put on stickers, as long as it's not third-party IP. There might be some things that we want to stay away with internal IP, especially if it comes around to like Ninjago and Friends and Monkey Kid and all the other things where there's ongoing lore. But otherwise, yeah, most things we'll let you know. If it's a sticker, we'll see it during the submission intake process, and we'll tell you if there's something wrong with the sticker where we need you to change it. So again, that's one of those things where it's not going to we're not going to reject your model because of it. We're just going to ask you to modify it. And so this is something too, I think we should probably point out, is that we're over 90% in approval for submissions that are models that are submitted. So, that tells you we're really working with you to make sure that you put a lot of time and effort into these models. We want to get this model pushed through to approval. If there's any little issues, we'll give you feedback on what you need to do to make those changes, and we give you more than enough time to make those changes too. The earlier you submit the model, the more time you have to make those changes as well. What defines a modular? Is it base plate and removable stories with closed walls? No. So there's several things that it's a collection of things together. It's not any individual things. So if you look at models like the Art Factory, there's the Antique Shop, I'm trying to think if there's anything in some of the newer models. The idea is that if you do a 32 by 32 base plate with the Technic connection plates on the side, a building that's not finished on 3 out of the 4 sides, those are the very modular aspects of a model, and doing all of them combined is where it's like, yep, that's a modular. If you're using a completely different base plate style, so for example, we're not saying you can't take the floors and have them separate vertically, but you'll see something like Art Factory where it opens up, it opens up vertically instead of being the stacks. That's a clearly differentiating feature. But then also you'll note that it's basically decorated on 3 out of the 4 sides, which is also something where if the model is decorated on 3 out of the 4 sides and it doesn't have flat walls on 3 out of the 4 sides that are meant to be adjacent to other buildings, then you're separating yourself from a modular. If you don't copy the sidewalk and the lampposts and all the other defining features of a modular, there's plenty of examples. And then look back at all the models that have been approved and into the voting period. Those are all we've said, okay, yep, they're far enough apart that this is okay. So just take a look at some of those, and that will help give you an idea of what we define as not being exactly like an existing icons modular. You said no official Lego logo, so does that include Lego Ideas logo on the torso? Again, a misunderstanding here. We're not saying that you can't use the Lego logo. We're saying that you can't do brick-built mosaics like an art set of a brick-built Lego logo. That's the issue. It's not you can't use the Lego logo. So like the Ideas torso is fine. Any torsos I think they're not in the palette anymore, I'm pretty sure, but there were torsos that had the Lego logo on the back of them. There were some parts from the Lego semi-truck that had the printed Lego logo on them. Those are all totally fine to use. You could have a sticker like we did back in the Lego modular store from the 2021 Invitational. That had a Lego logo sticker in it. So that's totally fine to do. It's just brick-built versions of the Lego logo specifically. With the book nooks that Lego launched, would it still be okay to do a book nook? Yep, that's fine. I think it's totally fine at this point. It's not something that at this point is something that at least we've received any guidance on. So should be fine because it's pretty generic in the sense of what it is. How many years away are we from custom printing, or will it ever be a thing? Could there ever be a custom minifigure BDP contest that are redesigned by an official designer? Probably not. What allows BDP to operate as fast as it does? Wow, I almost said fastly. That's weird. And what we have is that year and 5 months development cycle is because we are using everything that is currently in the active palette. We don't have to go out and develop new parts and develop new artwork for those parts, which then have to be manufactured. Sourcing and getting parts to where they need to be and then assembled into sets is a majority of the timeline in developing a BDP set. So if anything we do with that would significantly undermine what we're trying to do with BDP, and that's go to market as fast as we can. So it doesn't make sense. So custom, I'm not saying that it will never happen, but it would be against the core of what we're trying to do with BDP, and so custom elements is something we probably won't have. Working on a Pirate Imperial ship at around 2,000 to 2,500 parts. Due to parts selection, I'm going for a similar color scheme as Fortuna from Series 7. Would that be a problem? No issues. If anything, it's sometimes it can be a benefit in a sense where we get a lot of questions about this for Castle. Why wasn't my Castle set more popular? And it's something to think about, and this should also align with Pirate as well. Sometimes it's beneficial to make sure that your model fits in with the existing sets, right? In the sense that Mountain Fortress was so successful and amongst a bunch of other really nice castle sets in Series 1 because it was something new and unique, but still fit in with the current lore that existed at the time, that there was a Lion Knight castle, but there wasn't a Black Falcon castle. So you might see success doing that. With there being a really large, Fortuna coming down the pipeline, where that's a really large pirate ship, maybe it makes sense. And I say pirate ship in that it could be Imperial, Privateer, or whatever. It's that there's space for a 2,000 part set, right, to go alongside it. So if somebody's getting a 4,000 part pirate ship, maybe they're also going to be interested in a 2,000 part ship to go next to it. So that, I think that's a good idea, and sometimes it's nice to have the theming to go along with it so that it can sit in the same universe. Because one of the things that we do see is, well, that's a really cool set, but there's nothing that it can display alongside, or it can't go along anything next to it. So sometimes it is beneficial to build that in, where this is something that accompanies a Lego system set, for example, like Siege Encampment, really well with Lion Knight's Castle. And so therefore, that kind of gave it a little bit of extra bump in voting, in a sense, where I could see something that this could go alongside with. Same with kind of Camping Adventure and the A-frame cabin, and kind of paired together really well. And so there's really no evidence directly to say that influenced that to being closer or being higher in a voting, but that was a known quantity that already existed, that this would be really cool to display alongside this set, and so maybe it got a couple more votes because of that. I'm building a physical model of my submission, but in Studio, one area shows two pieces intersecting slightly, but there is clearly a gap in a physical model. Which medium is more important here? I would say it's the physical. The physical is always going to be the more important one. Sometimes we'll see some things digitally where maybe the part isn't 100% true, or the way that the parts interact, there might be slight issue. We see this, even internally on our own software. Every once in a while, something might work physically, and then we check it in the digital model, and the digital module says it doesn't work, and we'll go back and forth and we'll try to figure it out and see what's actually the issue there. But again, too, if there's any minor issues like that, those are all things we don't expect models to be perfect. There's always going to be models, even the models we design internally. So that won't prevent you from being selected as a finalist. If let's say we go through and we test build it, and that's actually, it looks like there's a gap, but really there's some other minor issue somewhere else that's causing this issue, or causing it to collide, and we're seeing that in Studio, then we would just ask that we would redesign that area and find a new solution for it. So again, if you build it physically and it looks like it works, and you're seeing an ever so slightly minor collision in Studio, then you're probably okay, and then we can readdress it if it does become a finalist. One more small question: can mini doll hairs be used on minifigs? They should be able to. If it's in the palette, then it's acceptable to use. So there's no major issue there. They all work. The only thing that you might want to consider is sometimes mini doll hair has different, the way that it sits on some minifigures with other accessories like neck pieces and different things like that. There might be some issues with connectivity there, where it collides more frequently than other minifigure specific hairstyles will collide. But Series 5, two of the final models went slightly over the 4,000 piece limit. How much leeway can finalists expect when refining their designs? It all depends on where we're at with the part threshold for a specific series, when we're trying to hit that 2,500 part average. So that 2,500 part average is what we use internally to basically judge how much time it's going to take to work on these models, since we don't have any other benchmarks on ahead of time how much time it's going to take to refine models. So we use that average part as a way to do that. And so therefore, sometimes we might have a series that's like 24, 30. And then that means, well, there's a little bit of extra parts that we can add to models, or there might be sometimes where, like Series 8, we're a little over, and so we got to try to bring that down a little bit. So it all depends from series to series. So some series might have more parts available for us to kind of add per se, and some series might have parts where we have to remove some parts and be a little bit more efficient. So it all depends. I have more than 32 by 32 and no street, but can I use a stacking technique for building floors so they are simply placed on top of each other with only a few connections? I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but you're allowed to, you can stack the floors. That's not a problem. If you're larger than 32 by 32 footprint, that shouldn't be an issue either. You don't need to have streets or sidewalks or anything like that. Depending on the type of model, maybe there might be some issues with that model not seeming as lively per se or whatnot. This is also feedback that we generally provide quite often, in that if your model, if you have a nice building and it's just the renders are just of that building and the minifigures aren't on the outside. If you look at, for example, if you look at a lot of the Lego group marketing images for certain models, we'll just use modulars for example. The models are alive, the minifigures are doing things and different activities outside of the building to make it look like it's alive. Sometimes we see models that there's no minifigures staged on the outside of the model or anything like that. And if it's built all the way edge, then maybe it makes it a little bit harder, but even with rendering, it shouldn't be an issue because they don't necessarily be attached to anything. So that's just something to consider. Just make sure that your models appear alive. The 1:6 slope in dark blue is missing from Studio, but it's used in the new Slave 1 from this year, so it should be available for Series 9, right? That's not necessarily true. Some parts might be available, some are not. If that part's available in other colors and it's not available in that dark blue, then it's most likely not available. I haven't checked the forum yet, but is light aqua coming back to the palette? And the answer is no. That one won't be. Light aqua is not coming back, or it's, at least at this point, it's not available in the palette. Will the team be checking our elements wish list like each time? Yes, so there's a little bit of this. We are checking it, but we're trying to do it in different bunches. What we're trying to get away from is the wish list, because a lot of the times what we're seeing is your wish list is parts that have not been in production or are available in other colors, but for some reason that color is not available. It is pretty rare that a part is missing in a color that's available, or in a part that's available in other colors already in Studio. It's usually all of that specific part are missing, and that's where the problem is. Or sometimes it's a one-off part because it's only available in one color. But yeah, most of the time it's because all of that part's missing and there's some mapping error and we got to go and fix that mapping error. What we're trying to get away from is the wish list, where it's like, oh, I want this part in this color because this part's available in another color, or because it was produced 4 years ago. It's like, well, that's not how this palette works. So all right, and then regarding the resubmission of models, does a complete color swap of a model count as an update even if the build itself stays about the same? It depends, but most likely it's going to be really hard to do a complete color swap without changing some things around. So I would lean towards yes, as long as it is not so blatantly like, hey, this is a 400 part model and you changed 10 parts on the outside to make it a different color. Like, without knowing each specific example, just color swapping something might typically be enough to justify it as a new model. But what I would also say is that if you should probably be considering a lot of the other feedback that is being provided to you. And if you're not requesting feedback, then maybe request feedback on what are other things you could do while you're already going through a significant change like that. So, well, and that's it. I think that's all of the questions that I've seen so far. If there is anything else that you have from a question standpoint, please feel free to join us in the forums. We are, like I said, we are answering questions there. And then we hope to see your models for Series 9. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your participation. See you soon. Bye.